Welcome to the Love is Our Nature podcast, where we discuss all things ranging from love, relationships, authenticity, fulfillment, to lessons from plant medicine journeys, inner healing, and living your truth. I'm not your teacher, I'm only your fellow student. Occasionally, you also get to hear some of my own healing process and journey back to love. The point of the program? That you take away at least one actionable piece of knowledge that supports you in expanding whatever aspect of your life your heart most desires. My name is Cesar Rodriguez. I will be your host, and I am honored to have you here. Happy listening. Okay, welcome to the Love is Our Nature podcast. This is episode 3, and I am so happy to have Molly Wilder here with me. Molly, we just met online just a couple of weeks ago, and we just talked once and really hit it off. I was a big fan of your work when I saw it online, when I saw that you do healing work, inner child work. And I was like, wow, this is a whole world that I'm starting to discover. And I'm just starting to get to know you still. So I don't want to butcher an introduction here. I'd love for you to say real quick, like who you are, what you do, and what should people know about you?
Sure. Thank you so much for having me, Cesar. It's really a joy to get to know you, and I'm excited for where this conversation is going to go. My name's Molly, and I struggle a little bit with a title. What am I? Who am I? Because oftentimes that is just, what do you do for work? And for work, I do a few different things and have done a lot of different things. I always talk about the first kind of 20 years of my conscious life being really about the body, whether that came from starting a yoga journey when I was 11, or even the physiotherapy and the chiropractic work that I went to as a kid. It's very definitely being about learning the tissues of my body. And that took me through, teaching yoga when I was 15, getting certified when I was 18, and then a career in athletic and exercise therapy, working with sports teams and dancers and all sorts of different people. And
you said you were teaching yoga at 15? Sorry.
I was teaching yoga at 15. Yeah. Wow. I used to teach in the high school. I used to go in and teach for the PE classes, which was really fun and a wonderful opportunity because it got me out of science or history or whatever classes I didn't want to be in at the time. And it's been really interesting because the later part of my career as an athletic therapist, I was working with high school students, and I would start to work on their bodies and realize that what was going on was emotional. And we would start talking as I was working on them. And, more often than not, we would start to walk down to the counseling suite because it was a lot bigger issue than I had the ability to decipher. But there was this intuitive transition where I started to realize that everything that was happening in the body was manifested from a mental, emotional, and spiritual plane. And so now I'm at the beginning of the next 20 years. I'm just a few years into it, where I think my work is to really integrate all 4 quadrants of the human experience: the mental, the emotional, the spiritual, and the physical. And so that's where I'm at now. And the titles that I use, tarot reader, sure. Okay. Intuitive life coach. Okay. Sure. Yeah. I haven't settled on any one thing because I think how you show up is so much more important than what you call yourself. And I like, when I say intuitive life coach, I like to say it's not me intuiting about you. It's me sharing a journey to help you learn your own intuition. And I think that's the magic of being in the body, is allowing yourself to hone these intuitive skills. So I mean, maybe I went a lot deeper in an introduction than you'd anticipated, but that's kind of where I'm at. And
yeah,
to
that's
put it
awesome.
in a nice little nutshell is very difficult. So.
No, that's great. They already gave me, just with what you just said, you gave me enough questions to fill this whole episode. So, yeah.
Excellent.
So we definitely want to talk about healing. I definitely want to talk about healing. It's a new world for me. I'll share a little bit later about my discovery of what's often referred to as the healing journey or the healing process. So I do have some questions about that. But I want to start with what you mentioned earlier regarding the body, right? You said it seems like everything's rooted, everything that manifests in the body has got, there's a lot more to it, right? Mm-hmm. So in my experience with ayahuasca and plant medicine ceremonies, that's where I started to get more in touch with my body. And I did walk away from my first ceremony with an understanding like, wow, any ailment or illness comes from my body trying to communicate something to me, or sometimes even a lack of love to somewhere, right? So how did you get in touch and discover how would you describe the human body and like the communications that it gives to you? I don't even know how to ask the question. Like,
it sounds like it's a really big question that is probably, for me to answer that on a scale of this is how everybody's human body works, probably isn't a question that I can answer and probably shouldn't try. I can tell you my experience. And, I think the body provides us, like you said, warnings, alarms. Hey, pay attention. Something is not aligned. And I want to be very careful when I use, words are very important to me, like I said. And there's a lot of jargon that we in the healing community use, especially, when you start to get into plant medicine, there's even more jargon that comes out in those communities. So when I say aligned, do I know the truth of what is in my heart and my head? And are those two things in alignment? Do they line up? And the body will tell you when you are not in alignment, when your head is doing one thing and your heart is saying, I need another. And one thing that jumps to mind is, there's so many, but one thing that jumps to mind for me right now is I've had a lot of locking through my sternum and the ribs.
A lot of what? I'm sorry?
Locking. So it feels like my ribs. I don't know if you've ever pushed your shoulders backwards and felt like a pop in the front of your rib cage. It's like cracking your back, but in the front.
I think I know what you're talking about.
Okay. And so when I sit with that and I go, okay, what's happening here? What is my body trying to tell me? I sat with it a couple nights ago and I felt this anger that lives in my rib cage and in my bones. And the longer I sat with it, the longer I kind of visualized what exactly was happening. I felt the anger around my whole torso in my rib cage, literally surrounding my heart. And so it is protecting my heart in some way. And so in ceremonies, we get the opportunity to be shot out of a cannon and straight into that pain, which is really, really beautiful and also very painful and difficult. And so my line of work and what I am learning to do with people, and it is an ongoing process where I'm learning more and more about it every day, is helping take that canon work that we do in plant medicine, whether it's ayahuasca or mushrooms. I've only ever worked with ayahuasca in this way. So I can't speak to the other medicines, but it's helping people really get into their body and start working with the felt sensations and the emotions that lie within those felt sensations. And in this way, we start to do the work of integrating the kind of intensity of work that we do in ceremony in a little bit of a gentler way and making that healing accessible to everybody.
Wow. And for you, in your own experience, what has this understanding of your body and this in touchness with your body provided you?
It's provided me with the truth. And it's, how do I explain this? The truth of who you are, of what you keep inside, the truth of your pain. You have experience with the Landmark series. And there's different ways of looking at yourself, looking at the perspectives. Is what I thought, is a story I'm telling myself about this really true? All of those kinds of inquiry are really valid, especially when you get into the felt sensations of the body. For me, this has provided me with a look inward, a magnifying glass that I can see exactly what is present. And that truth, however uncomfortable it is, can't be argued with. And that in itself breeds a lot of peace, a lot of love, a lot of self-compassion, and allows you to live from your essence, the essence of who you are, or some other people might say your authentic self.
I see. That's wonderful. And the access is noticing your body sensations, or how does it start?
I think it starts with getting really present. And I think we've heard that before. Right? That's not new. That's something that many people talk about. And when you start to get present with what you feel, let's do that now. I'm going to ask you, Caesar, what do you feel right now?
Well, I feel the cold tile floor on my feet here in Costa Rica. And my chest feels a little bit tight, being that I'm brand new to this podcasting deal, and here I am interviewing a guest that I didn't even know before, where in the past 2 episodes I had people in my life, like, how's this going to go? So I can already see
there.
It's funny because I started describing my sensation, and now here I am talking about like what's there for me, So it's like I was able to see it, like, and what was there for me is like, I'm trying to do this right. But anyway,
which implies that there's a belief that there's a wrong way of doing it.
Yep.
Right. So if we can allow ourselves to see and just breathe into that belief of, is it true that there's a wrong way of doing this? If the answer is yes, can that be okay? And if the answer is no, then can we allow ourselves to do it however way we want? And it's okay.
Yeah, completely. There is no wrong way to do this.
Right.
Yeah. Seeing that immediately starts to like lighten up this area here on my chest.
Right. So I always say, our sensitivity is our superpower.
Wow. It's no wonder that this whole world is brand new to me, because I spent my whole life like up here being completely logical and just wanting to get things done, like do the next thing and the next thing and the next thing. And my body sensations were like not like a non-issue. Like it wasn't a conversation. Like it's just like what's going on with me internally, right? So all right. So you said the way to get present is just by noticing our body now and all our body sensations. So what are you present to when you bring that consciousness of presence?
In this moment, I feel some energy moving up and down my chest. It's warm. I feel a lot of space to breathe. I feel very peaceful right now. And it's exciting, it's really exciting for me to be talking about this stuff. I love talking about it, and I don't always get the opportunity to. So I feel a lot of gratitude in my body, and that does feel warm. The felt sensation of it is warmth. So, yeah.
The felt sensation. I love that term that you use. I never heard it used that way before. The felt sensations. Right. Why felt versus like the feeling?
When I ask people how they feel, so whether they're my clients or, I offer a space for an online women's group, and we often talk about this stuff. When I say, how do you feel? What I notice is people most often tend to tell a story. I feel as though, I feel like there's a big weight. I feel like I need to get stuff done. All of that stuff is thought. It's not what we feel. So when we can phrase it with clarity and say, what is the felt sensation that is present with you? It's hard to say, well, the felt sensation is like there's a train coming out of, it's not, it's
I just heard the difference there. Yeah, I just saw the difference very clearly. We use the word feel like some thought thing, like some desire or something.
Yeah. And how many times in conversation with friends and family and colleagues do we say, I feel like it's not a good idea? No, that's a thought. I think it's not a good idea. So there's a cultural trend to say what we're feeling say what we're thinking as though it's a feeling. So for clients, it can be, the cultural trend versus the work that I do can cross over in a very ambiguous way. So I try to be as clear as I can.
Wonderful. Okay. All right. So here's one of the main things I want to ask you. This whole thing got started off of my first ayahuasca ceremony about 4 years ago. So I want to know your story. How did you end up doing an ayahuasca ceremony? How long ago? And what was the before, the during, and the after? Like, what was your life before? What was your life after? And what was like the during that had you see whatever you saw?
Yeah. Well, I'll start with the before because that seems the intuitive place to start. I was really depressed. I moved in and out of suicidal ideation most of my teen years, even younger in my preteen years. And then in my 20s, it got really bad, and did all the things that often goes along with that. So numbing with alcohol, having a lot of partners, going through relationships, falling head over heels in love to try and fill voids. And it was really painful. And I ended up working for a football team for about 3 years, just a CJFL football. It's like
working for who?
A football team. So Canadian football. The CJFL, so it's Canadian rules, but it's junior football. So it's kind of club level for guys who are trying to get into college through football scholarships, that kind of thing. And it was, looking back at it, I see in so many ways how it was kind of driven by my own trauma, trying to fill voids, trying to diminish my own sensitivity, trying to shut myself down, to the point of going and working in this highly masculine world of like toughen up. So it's just looking from it now, it's very interesting. But after the last year that I worked with them, it was a really intense year. There was a lot of personalities on the team, and I felt rocked after. And I still had a lot of student debt, and I was struggling under finances and everything else. And so I moved into a 1993 Westphalia van on December 2nd, right before one of the worst winters that we've had on record. So there was
Vancouver, right? Did we say?
I was on Vancouver Island at that time in Canada. Yeah. And there was days, in January where I would be snowed into the van and I wouldn't be able to get the doors open. And there was a lot in there. And I was working at a high school as well at that time, and it was really amazing. The principal of the high school, she got wind of me living in my van, and she's like, hey, you know what? Here's a key. Come in and take a shower. Park back behind the school. I think she knew the mental struggle that I was going through, and the way that the community of the high school kind of took small ways to take care of me is always going to sit in my heart. Like I'm incredibly grateful for that community. It's a pretty incredible school. And yeah, I spiraled deeper while I was living in the van, and decided I had wanted to work with ayahuasca about 6 years ago. In 2014, I kind of started hearing about it, and it was always on my radar, but I just couldn't, I couldn't pull the trigger to get down to Peru. And it turned out that there was a group sitting in Vancouver, and it kind of came to me synchronistically. And that summer I went to Vancouver for my first ceremony. And it's strange. They asked you to wear white, and you came in, there was a group about 50 people. Everyone had buckets. They offered me a bucket, and there was this guy sitting on the stage. It was actually in the basement of a church, and he started playing music from his computer, and I had no idea what a ceremony was like. So I was like, okay, maybe this is a ceremony. I came in with a really strong intention and ended up having 2 really powerful ceremonies that started unlocking different parts of myself. And when we talk about inner child work, this is the type of parts that I'm talking about, these parts of myself that I had abandoned, that had not felt the pain of whatever was happening to them at given situations. And that pain had lodged itself within my body. It had not been integrated yet. And that's the first time that I started experiencing that opening.
Sorry, Molly. I am in Costa Rica, and sometimes my Wi-Fi is a little bit spotty, so I might ask you here and there, like,
no problem.
Please repeat that. Or what did you say? So what did you say about the pain?
So the pain that had lodged in my body from those incidences that hadn't been integrated yet. So when we allow ourselves to feel our emotions, we're integrating those emotions. They can be fully expressed. When we don't fully express our emotions, they lodge themselves within our tissue. So I came out of that ceremony, and, I had some answers. I felt a little bit better, but there was no support around that ceremony. There was no integration, no follow-up. And the integration sessions that they did afterwards, it's not something that I would think, looking back after more experience, would ever support anybody. So, it was kind of, there's a little bit of a joke. We kind of look back and think, oh yeah, the ayahuasca DJ, it was a little bit of an unsafe situation. Fortunately, it worked out fine for me. And it wasn't a year, it was a year later before I started working with ayahuasca again, because about 6 months later, I actually started to go back into that suicidal ideation, and I was really struggling. And it was actually harder than ever, because I had thought ayahuasca would give me an out, that it would somehow magically heal me, because I had heard all these stories and people were talking, and now I was more desperate than ever. So I started looking at Gabor Mate's work. I started going to his conferences, reading his book, When the Body Says No, and which incidentally spiraled me even deeper, just because I was so desperate. And I made a decision.
Whose work did you say?
Dr. Gabor Mate.
Okay.
He's incredible. A lot of what I've learned from him. I did a compassionate inquiry training for a year under him and his team. And he won the Order of Canada in 2018 for his work on trauma. He's world renowned, absolutely phenomenal. And if you're getting into this work, he's definitely a must read. He's written a number of books and has a very refreshing take, something that it hasn't really been in mainstream healing ever. So I've learned a lot from him. After attending his conference in Victoria, I made a decision saying, okay, I'm going to have some compassion for myself in that this is where I'm at. I knew a different group that held ceremony, and I actually had friends who had sat with them and had told me a completely different experience than what I had experienced in my first ceremony, which, it sounded like going to Disneyland in my first ceremony compared to what they were talking about of like a sacred space, a sacred ceremony. So I decided, okay, I was going to give myself one more try. And if this didn't work, then I was allowed to kill myself without guilt, without that, I was allowed to compassionately leave this world. And I mean, it did work because I'm sitting here with you. And this was 3 years ago. And what came up for me in that ceremony was, memories that I didn't know I had. And when I say that, I want to be careful because it's very easy, especially when we don't remember things, to make stories up to fill in gaps in our memory. And when I say memories, I'm talking about felt sensations that are memories. So I remembered the feelings of things in my body. And it took me a long time to begin to trust those feelings as, these actually happened. And anytime I don't remember, or I don't trust, my body will always give me a clear sign of like, stop, reset yourself. You need to trust me. And so I've learned the process over 3 years of not making up stories, but of just saying, okay, I trust my body. And developing that trust has allowed me to develop trust with other people, which is not something in 27 years of living that I had ever experienced. So that was the beginning of it when I was 27 of really uncovering some pivotal things that have helped me heal. Since then, it's been a journey of integration. And the circle that I sit in, we always say the real ceremony starts when you leave ceremony. It's the integration after you come out of ayahuasca. This is the most important part. Because if you're just going in, for the downloads or for the connection to cosmos or the cosmic codes or whatever verbiage you want to use, you're not integrating the work. It doesn't matter how many files you have downloaded on your computer. If you don't know how to use those files efficiently, they're no good to you. And this is what I'm deeply passionate about, especially when I talk about ayahuasca. It is hard. There is no easy way, and going to plant medicine isn't just like a quick cure-all. And I learned that the hard way. So yeah, this integration piece, this is the work that I do now for myself. And this is the work that I'm working towards helping other people do. And for me, it all comes down to the truth. And integration means, ayahuasca teaches us to listen. It teaches us to listen to our bodies. It teaches us to listen to our intuition. Can we take that skill, that listening skill, and put it to use in our day-to-day life? With the many modalities that help us with that, whether it is, like we were talking about in our first conversation, Akashic records, whether it is sound healing or tarot, which is what I work with, or astrology, what are the modalities that you are drawn to? Perhaps it's psychology. Perhaps it is a more mental modality. But can you apply that to the body? Can you really listen? And this is the work I think we have each of us to do in our life. Yeah.
I mean, there's so much wisdom in what you're saying. There's been times that I have gotten such valuable insight out of ceremony that I remember walking away like, all right, it's going to be a while before I go back again because I have a lot of integrating to do, right? And there will be like a whole year before I participate again at times. And And I remember in the beginning, it wasn't quite that way. And I remember maybe around the third or fourth time that I went in for ceremony, I pretty much had the experience that the medicine was just like, oh, well, you haven't quite integrated what we worked on last time or we talked about last time. So like, what are you doing? You're always welcome here because this is home, but there's not a whole lot here for you right now. Because I was like, yeah, I didn't get much this time. And that's when I learned, like, wow, there's a lot of more respect that I got to bring towards the things that I walk away with, right?
Yeah.
It is, I call it pyrotechnics, right? You're so right. It's not about the pyrotechnics,
Yeah.
and all that stuff. Going back to the memories that you didn't know you had that during ceremony come up. I've actually heard that from quite a few people where there's some traumatic experience that they see that they had in ceremony. Well, in ceremony, they see like a past memory of a traumatic experience that they had, and being in ceremony for some reason uncovered it. And for the people that I've spoken to, oftentimes are like, well, I don't know if that actually happened because I don't remember that ever happening. Something about it felt so real, right? So what would you say about that? Like, how would somebody know if, like, first of all, why does that happen if memories are real? And second, how does somebody know if it's something that actually happened or just some imaginary thing?
Yeah. I think this is tough because, again, I learned this the hard way where I had these same questions 3 years ago, and I had somebody else actually tell me what was true and not. And I have really sunk my roots into the belief that we can't tell anybody else what is true for them ever. I can't sit here and say, oh, if you see it in ceremony, it's for sure true. It's not, right? And everybody has to go through this process for themselves. What I will say is trust the feeling in the body. Our bodies cannot lie to us. Our minds can lie to us. They can play tricks on us. We call it the monkey brain for a reason, but our bodies can't play tricks on us. Ayahuasca and other plant medicine, they can play tricks on us. And I have one ceremony that stands out to me in particular where I was stripped of being a teacher. Ayahuasca just took everything, all of that teaching from me. And part of that, I spent 3 months after that ceremony just in despair because I felt like she told me I couldn't be a teacher. I wasn't allowed to teach yoga anymore. I wasn't allowed to teach. I was teaching sleep training at the time. I was teaching, I have this teacher archetype in me that just desperately wants to come out. And I felt like, she took that away from me because she came down on me really hard, as nature would, as a storm outside would, as a tornado would. Like, ayahuasca's nature. You can't control it. Right. And she took all of that stuff away from me. And so I left being like, oh, I can never teach again. I have to let this go. And having gone through that process and having come back to ceremony and having integrated all of that, I'm learning that no, she took that away from me so that I could realize what was really, really important to me, so that I could make a choice and say, no, I am a teacher. I'm going to teach. And I am not only going to teach, but I'm going to be a disciple of the teachers who have come before me. And
not only are you going to teach, but you're going to be what?
Be a disciple of the teachers who have come before me, of my teachers. And that means integrating the knowledge that I have been gifted and to really live that. And what does that look like? And that was my integration work for a long time and still is. So I think it's important, when you come out of ceremony, when you think, oh, ayahuasca said this to me and ayahuasca said that to me, and I can't do this. And I have new rules to live by, to really sit with those, to sit with the feelings in your body and allow time before you go. yes, this is it. Because sometimes she's trying to teach you something different, and those lessons come long after you've left the ceremony space. And that has stuck with me. I know that was a little outside of your question about the memory, so I'll jump back to that. Yes, it does come back to the body. And I've had experiences where I will feel things in my body and I'll have horrific visualizations. Now, not to beat around the bush about it, but I was experiencing the memories of childhood sexual abuse coming back. And this is not an uncommon story for these to come back in ceremony. And the visuals that I got from it, thinking back, it can't possibly be those visuals. I don't trust those visuals. What I do trust is that ayahuasca was helping me understand the feeling in my body with those visuals. Had those visuals not come up, I might not have understood the sensation that I was having, my legs winding together, terror, disgust in my body, the feeling between my legs of violation. Those feelings are very real and they're irrefutable. The story will help you understand those feelings, but it's not the story that we need to attach to in any way, shape, or form. Does that answer your question?
Yes. Yeah. It sounds like it's not quite black and white. Really, you got to check in with your body, right? And yeah, I mean, there's a lot that we could talk about with how to relate to those visions and what it provides and all of that, right? Like, what would you say? Like, if I were listening to this, and I never had experienced plant medicine ceremonies, like, what would you say to somebody that said something like, wow, like, why would I want to participate in something that might have me see such visuals? Like, I don't want to see those things.
Yeah. Before I answer that question, I want to say I'm not an authority on this. I'm only speaking from my own experience and from the wisdom that my teachers have passed on to me. So, it's really important, I think, to get support through it, not just go to ceremony and expect to be able to do all the work. The support that I had outside of ceremony is enormous. Like living on people's couches while they fed me so that I could really allow myself to experience, the integration and the pain of what was coming up. The support around it, like I think so often we talk about ceremony, but we don't talk about like what else is needed to support the integration. And that's my experience. If I was someone who was listening to this conversation and thinking, why the hell would I do that? I think for anybody who, sometimes we're listening to things because it's crazy what people do. It's crazy what people go through, and we want to hear those stories. It allows us to see the fullness of humanity. For people who have considered it before and who are listening, I think there has to be a draw, like it's calling you because you want to know yourself. There's something in you. Perhaps it's not in yourself. There's something that is calling you forward that you have to know, but you don't know what it is. You don't know what it's about. So I think for anyone who's listening who has felt like, oh, I think I need to go, that's your journey. And it's not always like what I'm talking about. I have had beautiful ceremonies where I'm, a 2-year-old and I'm also, a goddess with my arms around this 2-year-old, and ayahuasca is teaching me to care for myself. Like beautiful and epic ceremonies that have taught me how to be there, how to love myself, how to be compassionate. And so, we are talking about kind of the end of the spectrum when we're talking about memories and the difficult stuff that comes up. But there is also this really beautiful side of it, just like the tornadoes come with beautiful sunrise is. It's nature. It has everything.
Yeah. There's a cliche saying, right? You got to be willing to be with the dark if you want to be with the light, right?
Yeah.
You got to be willing to go to the dark.
We talk about shadow work, and it's kind of these again, it comes back to these trendy words that we use and healers use. And if you think of a shadow, what is it? Well, something, if I am looking at my shadow, it means there's light behind me. So there is this coupling of light and darkness in ceremony. So it's not, it's not always diving into the darkest pits with no light. Shadows have to have light. Otherwise they're not shadows.
Yes. Yeah. I love this little meme that I ran into that I shared online, which was, it looked like Peter Pan or something. He was dancing and you see his back and you see his shadow against the wall. And it says, when you dance with your shadow, the light has your back.
Beautiful. Yeah, totally.
So it is that way. Ayahuasca is very much gonna take you to some of the roughest places, some of the hard experiences I've been in, or during ceremony. And yeah, sometimes I walk away feeling beat up or I was trapped or for eternity or something and horrible. But then there's this other side of it, what becomes available, right? And it's hard to even put into words. So thanks for exploring that a bit with me. Let's talk about tarot briefly. How did you get into tarot?
I got into it through ceremony and just this desire to see myself for exactly how I was showing up. Mm-hmm. And the tarot is a beautiful modality. And there's many ways of using it. The way that I use it is like a mirror. It just shows me what I can't see about myself. And so I started using it a few years ago when I was integrating some of the work that had come up through ceremony. And I have amazing, again, I've been very lucky to have these amazing teachers come into my life to show me the ropes and to point me in the right direction. And one of my teachers, Natalie Rousseau, has worked with her tarot, not as a tarot reader, but for self-inquiry for a very long time. And so I started through some of her coursework, and I started to understand symbols and to listen to what my body was saying. And again, it always comes back to my body, but to have that reflected in the archetypes that show up in tarot, these goddesses or gods, or even you pull the devil card, which is one of the reasons that tarot has such a polarizing view in some cultures. When I pull that card for myself, I see it as how am I creating my own suffering right now? What attachments do I have to a situation, to maybe an addiction, social media or TV or whatever it is? How am I creating my own suffering in this instant? And you have all of these symbols that if you look at it, if you look at, for instance, a crab, if you look at, so in astrology, you have Cancer, okay? And the symbol for Cancer is the crab. Well, what is it? Where does it live? Let's look at that. And it's the same way that we just looked at the shadow of what is it truly? You look at the crab, you look at these symbols that show up in tarot, and you think, okay, well, there's this hard outer surface and this really soft underbelly. So how am I showing up right now with armor on to protect my sensitivity? They also live in, there's sand, there's ocean. It's not super deep. There's kind of this current that they live in with lots of other crabs. So there's this familial aspect to them. So I was really drawn in by the beauty of the archetypes. I was really drawn in by the myth of tarot, all the myths that it winds up, whether it's Egyptian or the wisdom embedded in Jewish mysticism or Christian mysticism. That is such a realm that appeals to, you know, the mystic in me or the whimsy in me. Even the little inner children in me who just love fantasy and fairy tales. So it just was like a perfect fit. And then one day, I had my first tarot deck, and one day this woman who was part of my women's circle dropped off 4 tote boxes of tarot cards. And it was just like this divine moment of like, hey, you're going to work with these and you need to learn them. So that's what I've been doing ever since. And it's been a really amazing journey.
That's awesome. That's awesome. And for the sake of time, I want to go to a slightly different subject, because I can ask you a lot more about tarot also. This is probably like my last question. And before I go into my experience of this discovery of the healing journey, right?
Yeah.
What would you say to people, like how I would have been like a couple of years ago, and that would kind of scoff a bit at this whole healing journey? What is why not just like Molly, why not just go live life, have fun, like make the best of it? Like, why try to do all this process of yourself, like overanalyze yourself? Why not just go have a good time and make the best of life? Isn't that what we're here for?
I would say that I am having a good time and that I am making the best of life. I would say for where they are in life, you know, where they are is perfect. I think we really need to respect that we're on, you know, each one of us are on a journey. And however much I would want, you know, my sisters to come to ceremony with me, or my mom to come to ceremony and experience it, they're on their own journey. And the only journey that I am responsible for is my own. So how can I integrate those feelings of frustration, those feelings of sadness that they're not doing it? Those feelings of frustration and sadness, that is my responsibility. And if I get those sorted out, I can show up with those people in my life with more love, with more compassion, and more patience. Does that always happen? Hell no. Like, no, it does not. But I'm doing my best. And I think that's all we can do. But for those people who say like, you know, go have fun. Like I'm having fun. Like, this is fun to me. So yeah.
There's something about discovering yourself and personal growth and development that is quite adventurous and enjoyable, you know, like expanding, right? Being the best version of ourselves, being the truest version of ourselves, the most authentic, our essence, right? So,
and that's, awesome. You know, that's really, sorry.
No.
That's really, you know, why I do it. And I see, and you talked about the Essential Path, which is one of the courses that I offer throughout the year for women. When we're looking at the Essential Path, like, it's not my essential path, it's our essential path. Like, each person has this path that they walk. And the more that they witness who they are and accept who they are in exactly the way that they show up, that pollution that we've been carrying with us, whether that's pollution of old trauma, core beliefs, judgments, stories, all of that stuff, we kind of clear it away. And then our essence, which is always there, it's not like we've lost it. You know, the love and peace and truth and strength, these are all things that we are. These are the qualities of essence, and they're always in us. But the more we depollute ourselves, the more that can shine through. And, you know, that is joy right there. Yes.
Wonderful. Yeah. So well put. Well, and what a perfect segue, because I do want to share with you, like, how I discovered what we call the healing journey. Yeah. So this story could be like a whole hour, so I'm going to do the spark notes, right? And it started with a good friend randomly sending me a text message saying, "Hey, I felt I should share this contact with you." Funny she said she felt, right? "I felt I should share this contact with you. She's my Akashic record reader, in case you want to reach out to her." And I had heard of Akashic record readers and stuff, you know, like, about how, like, it's where all knowledge, thoughts, and information and the universe is kept from the past, the present, and future. And all that sounded like hocus pocus to me. And then if I didn't understand it, I couldn't trust it. So I wanted nothing to do with it. But this time, this was like around October of 2020, I was so intrigued by the randomness of it that I'm like, sure, I'll reach out. Got nothing to lose. And I procrastinated for about a month and a half until I finally have the consultation, which coincidentally landed the day before my annual ayahuasca ceremony. I do go about once a year. And I hop on Zoom with this lady in Argentina, and it was in Spanish, right? Expecting absolutely nothing, like just really going in it like, oh, let's see what comes out of this. And she just asked me for my full name. So I tell her my name, Cesar Leonardo Rodriguez Villar. And she says, okay, close your eyes. I close my eyes. About 10 seconds later, she's like, okay, open them. And right off the bat, she's like, so here's the thing with you. You're a very stubborn soul. You receive guidance and you don't use it. And you've strayed so far off your soul purpose that your soul is sad. And you become so rigid that you've kind of lost access to really connect with your soul, because the access is the world of emotions, your feelings and your emotions. And you've lost touch with the world of emotions. She said to me, you've learned to succeed in the world of in the material world. And that's what your guides are saying. They're like, yeah, she started just telling me what my guides were saying, right? I wasn't expecting that. And she says, yeah, you know how to succeed in the world of the material, but you've lost touch with the world of emotion and the world of subtleties, she said. That was interesting. I'm still unpacking what she meant by subtleties. And that kickstarted that conversation, like, okay, well, this is going to be an interesting talk. And I figured that love and relationships would be a good topic to discuss with a psychic, right? So
of course, yeah.
Yeah, I say to her, you know what? Before doing the Landmark Forum, about 6 years ago, I used to fall head over heels in love with women, and I'd see them like Juliet, and I'd want to be their Romeo, and things would start off at like the most incredible high note. It was like a fairy tale. But then the moment we'd come to day-to-day life and she was a regular human being, I would decide that this doesn't work. It's not the same. She changed.
Which is amazing because, even in the moment of deciding I want to be her Romeo and she's my Juliet, well, what happened to them? You're deciding on an archetype that dies.
Right. Yeah. And all this romantic stuff, right? And then thankfully, when I did the Landmark Forum, I discovered a lot of the compensation that was taking place from my behalf, like trying to get some sort of worth or validation from her, which was an unwinnable game for her. So sorry to all my exes, and I tell her, I share that with her, and I say, but for the last year or two, I do have a harder time, like giving my heart away like I used to, and opening my heart that way. And I said that taking into account something that one of my exes told me during 2020 when we spent some time together. She said to me, you're not opening your heart. When we were looking to rekindle the relationship, and I was like, what are you talking about? I'm here. I came to meet you. Like, I did it out of love. Like, I don't know what you mean. And I'm asking this Akashic record reader about this, right? So like I do have a harder time giving my heart away like I used to. And she says, she basically stops everything. She's like, all right, let's be real. You've never given your heart away. And I'm like, what? Surely I must have, at least with this other one or this one. I'm thinking to myself. And then she says, giving your heart away is being willing to expose your deepest insecurities, fears, traumas to your partner, and allowing your partner in to see all of that. And you'd have to accept all those parts of yourself first. And you have never done that in your life. And I was like, okay, I think you got a point, lady. So at this point I was saying, all right, there's some blind spot here for me. And I even asked her about one specific ex of mine, and she's like, yeah, you were too rigid, so she gave up on you. And I asked her about Landmark. I was very involved with Landmark as a program leader, training to be a program leader ever since I did the Landmark Forum 6 years ago. And she said, yeah, there's nothing wrong with being there. You just got to understand it's not the full picture, right? Like, you can understand that's also kind of a very mental approach. And you can understand why you became the way you became, but you can't convince your body not to hurt, right? So that made sense to me. And that's when I started realizing, okay, I have some introspection to do here, right? And I asked her, what do I do about this rigidity? And she said, well, you have to be willing to touch your pain and break down in your pain. And I was like, how do I do that? She said, well, first you got to choose it, understand that it's not that it's a voluntary thing and that it's not going to be easy. And second, you have to be willing to surrender to another who's willing to hold space for you. Like when you're in your ceremonies, she says, surrender to your facilitator. And I was like, you know what? I do see that in ceremony. I've mostly been intrigued by the pyrotechnics, by the insights even, and not really going within much. And she's like, yeah, don't do that. When you're in ceremony, say, put one hand on your heart, one hand on the earth, and say, I don't want to understand, I want to heal. So I really took that to heart. I thought that was beautiful. And going into the ceremony the following day, I went in with just one intention, which was to discover what aspect of myself I'd been suppressing and allow it the space to show up and give it love and healing. And that's exactly what happened. Right at the beginning of the ceremony, the moment I start going into that meditative experience, I see this 4-year-old version of myself. And I recognize, he was sitting on the floor with his knees up, his arms on his knees and his forehead on his arms, crying. I recognized him because it was the same 4-year-old that I had shared about every single time I led an introduction to the Landmark Forum, which was one of the biggest things that came from doing the Landmark Forum. I saw that something happened when I was 4. And this is what I would share with people. I gave this girl in pre-K a paper heart because I had the warm and fuzzies for her. I cut it out myself and gave it to her. And she came back about half an hour later and she wrinkled it up and she threw it on the ground. She said, this heart's garbage. Yeah. And during the Landmark Forum, I discovered that in that moment, I decided that sharing my feelings is a bad idea because it's dangerous and it hurts. So from that moment on, unless I had concrete proof or evidence that the girl was into me, I wouldn't say a word. And then I did the Landmark Forum and I had a breakthrough, right? I saw that an upset 4-year-old had been running my life and I invented the possibility of being vulnerable, courageous, and accepting. And I took actions that before I never had before, right? So people would clap when I would share that with them because I would ask a girl out, and with no evidence, right? And it was like I really had a breakthrough. And I did. And I've gotten so much value out of all the work I did in Landmark, right? But I started discovering there's another aspect of things here. This was a huge discovery for me when I was sitting there seeing this 4-year-old. And now having spoken to the Akashic record reader, I started to understand some more. I was like, wow, I understood at a logical level everything that happened and what the result was, but I never felt the pain that 4-year-old felt. I've never allowed myself to feel that pain. And that was the beginning of this new path. I had a phone call with every single person who had been a contribution to me at Landmark, the leaders. I honored them as best I could. I acknowledged them. I thanked them. Yeah. And I said, I'm not going to finish the apprenticeship. I experienced probably the biggest calling I've ever experienced. And I'm going to go in that direction and discover what the healing process is, undergo it myself, and hopefully share with people afterwards a route that they can take right? Create some sort of a resource for them, whether it's a resource list or a workshop, who knows, right? So that was just such a strong calling for me, right? Over and over again in my notes, it said, when people fall, and I would see people falling, like with the moment they get present to some wound, like when they fall, I'll catch them and we'll cry together. And I'll start with me, and I'll give them a community to cry with, and together we will heal.
Yeah.
Right. So that's what I'm up to now. And thank you for letting me share that with you. That's how I discovered this whole world of inner healing. And I started to see what people mean by the inner child. So, yeah, that's
and it's so
layered
too, like I'm so excited for you. And I'm so grateful that you shared that with me, Cesar, because this is so exciting when you find those parts of yourself, because not only can you care for yourself like you needed someone to care for you back then, you can start to play, once those feelings have been integrated. And this is one of my favorite things about inner child work is, if I'm sitting with one of my children, say it's an 8-year-old who is feeling really lonely, if I'm there for her, what do you need to say? What do you need me to say to you? Do you need a hug? Well, going through that dance with that inner part of yourself and doing that reparenting. But then once those feelings are integrated, there's like a letting go, and you go, okay, what do you want to do now? Like, do you want to go, how do you want to play? How do you want to like explore? And you get to be with yourself. Like, I have discovered this playfulness in me that has been repressed for so long. And it's such a joy. It's such a deep honor to be with myself. And I know that sounds so, it sounds a little big-headed when I say it like that, but
not at all. Not at all. I so get what you mean. Like to really connect, right, with that inner child, that playful expression of yourself. It's beautiful.
Yeah.
So yeah.
Cesar, I'd really love, I think, there's so much more to your story, and, I'm an interviewer as well. So if you ever want to share more of your story on your podcast, I'd love to flip the script and interview you for your podcast one day.
Oh, wow. That sounds wonderful. And we shall.
Okay. Sounds great.
So yeah, no, this was such a cool connection out of nowhere, like literally, like you're in Vancouver, I'm here in Costa Rica, and just launched this podcast a couple weeks ago, and like here we are. It's just amazing the way the universe works. So Molly, thank you so much for being my guest, for taking the time to have this whole conversation together, for sharing your journey so vulnerably, so openly. I'm sure like it was valuable for people to hear, maybe just have them feel recreated, like, wow, you know what? I've felt that way before. And you've come such a long way, right? And the little time that I've gotten to know you, like just hearing your stories, I see like such a long way that you've covered. And I'm sure I only know a tiny little fraction of it. So yeah, we'll definitely have more conversations. We'll be in touch. And yeah, this won't be the last episode we do together. So thank you, Molly. Anything you want to say before we close up?
Yeah, I would love to. Can I share some contact information? I would love to hear other people's stories. And, like I said, I have podcasts as well from here in Vancouver Island and for women. But I would love to hear anyone listening. I'm on Instagram at Molly J. Wilder. And I just love it when people email me, like mollyjwilder@gmail.com. Like, I love to connect. So thanks.
Wonderful. Wonderful. So people can find you on Instagram at Molly J. Wilder. They can email you. And anything else?
I have a website. It's just mollyjwilder.com. Everything's the same. It's pretty simple.
Okay. That's perfect. I'm jealous. I got love is our nature _ Yeah. One day. All right, Molly. Well, this was great. Thank you, everybody. Go to loveisOurNature.com, subscribe on iTunes, on Spotify, on YouTube, sign up for our newsletter. We got some big blogs coming out. There's some poetry that came to me in my last ceremony that I'm going to be sharing on there as well. So thank you for being part of this journey. We love you, and we'll see you again soon.
Thank you.
Bye-bye. That is all, folks. I hope you enjoyed this episode. Thank you for being a valued listener. If you haven't already, remember to subscribe to the podcast in whatever your favorite platform is. You can also watch the video version of the episode on the Love is Our Nature YouTube channel. Check out loveisournature.com as well. That's where you can see our latest news and most recent content. If you enjoyed the episode, leave a review, share it with your friends, or email me. I love hearing what you took away for yourself out of listening. My email is Caesar@loveisournature.com. That's CESAR, or Cesar, like my mother says it, at loveisournature.com altogether. Till next time, I'll be here rooting for you. And remember, whatever the question, love is the answer.